Well, hello to you all, and welcome to this Bath Life Presents Kingswood School. I hope this finds you well. Today we have a fascinating session. We'll be discussing students, teachers, exams, prospects this year, what's new at Kingswood and what's planned. We'll be showing a few visuals of some interesting work this summer and developments, pandemic learnings and what might endure, pastoral approach, borders, perhaps the public role of private schools, involvement with other Bath schools, and much, much more in the company of Kingswood's headmaster, Andrew Gordon-Brown. Some news from Bath Life before we get going. We've got a few more business clubs and business surgeries coming up. This is the first of a trio of webinars this September and the autumn related to education and all the universities. Our next Bath Life Business Surgery is on Monday, 27th of September at 11 AM with Bath Spa Uni, exploring how the university and Bath businesses can help students. Clearly, this cohort of students, whether sixth formers or graduates and students at the two universities, have been so toughly hit in terms of work placements and experiences and so on. So what can businesses do to help that cohort? That'll be a really, really useful session. We're also joined by Clearly PR for that session as well. There's a Bath Life Business Surgery in October with the University of Bath. It's their School of Management. That'll be focusing on retail, academic learnings applied to a commercial setting. The Bath Life webinars are bespoke deep dive sessions showcasing companies and organisations' expertise through discussion, and also some visuals as we'll see today as well. Please talk to us about how you might be involved. These surgeries and presents and so on will be continuing as virtual in the future with enduring value via our Bath Life YouTube channel. If business begins with a conversation, perhaps we should talk. Bath Life Awards. Well, I hope you've heard the news that we, for reasons you can imagine, slightly beyond our control, the awards will now be on the 21st of September, which is it's a week tomorrow, eek, as they say, and that's at the Bath Pavilion. And I gather that Andrew himself will also be there as a guest, I think, with Unividual, which is terrific. Thank you for the support from hundreds and hundreds of people and companies for our change of date and venue. As mentioned, those COVID capacity circumstances beyond our control. As a consequence, a handful, I think it changes, almost by hour. I think it's 7 tickets left, something like that. A handful of places are available. First come, first served, and we'll be delighted to see you there. That moment where everyone comes together from charities to arts, education, all sectors of business, after this year of all years, would be just the best Bath occasion in ages. And to say, we obviously have very careful COVID safety guidelines. They're all available on our site. We ran a very recent event, similar event in Exeter recently, and it was just terrific to see how supportive companies and individuals are. These are the postponed from the spring of 21 awards, and for next year, we'll be back to our spring schedule, March 3rd. If you're an ambitious company or one seeking more business, plain proud to be a leading Bath company or organisation, please do consider sponsoring the Bath Life Awards 2022. Effective, efficient, and uber glam, allegedly. There you go. Bath Property Awards, they'll be running on the 22nd of October at the Apex City Bath Hotel. It's a great gathering of property and pro services companies. Latest sponsor is Cox & Cox, our thanks to them. Please talk with the Bath Life team about the few remaining sponsorships. And of course, our headline sponsor is Motors Druitt. Motors Druitt also sponsor our Bath Life Business Clubs, which will be coming back next month to the Royal Crescent. Okay, one other, EntreConf. We ran a pretty successful inaugural entrepreneurs event, EntreConf, in the summer, in July, as a virtual event, and we're holding a special EntreConf dinner, October 11 at Avon Gorge from 7 PM. It's a strictly limited event, and it'll be a very special event as well. It's got the networking, meeting a whole load of entrepreneurs and so on, and excellent dinner. But the sort of center point is a live interview, and questions is one of the Southwest's leading entrepreneurs, Simon Ware of Play Sports Network. As it happens, he's a current Kingswood parent with two of his two kids at Kingswood currently. So please come along if you want to meet fellow entrepreneurs, continue those EntreConf conversations, and we'll be covering in both Bath Life and Bristol Life, as well as on the site. One last, just to say, as we so often do, thank you ever so much for the support that you have given Bath Life at all times, but particularly these last 18 months. We're very, very proud to publish a magazine that celebrates all the great stuff in Bath, and gosh, there's loads. So thank you. So let's talk education with Kingswood. Please welcome its headmaster, Andrew Gordon-Brown, and see how he is this morning and what the plans are for Kingswood this autumn and beyond. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Greg. I just realised I hadn't turned my camera on, so I think am I with you? I'm with you, I believe.
You are very much with us. And
Great, well, yeah, Greg, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be back. Yeah.
It's nice to be back, and I'm gratified you're here. Otherwise, I'd be asking questions to avoid, which would never do. So tell us this. I mean, you've had the reasonably singular experience of becoming a headmaster in those dog days of COVID last July, August, September, and then full year and so on. How has that been for you? How have you managed that? How have you navigated it?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Look, let's be honest. You wouldn't choose to change jobs, let alone become the headmaster of a school in a pandemic, because all the protocols in place were designed to keep people apart. Whereas as a new head, your kind of primary role is to just build relationship and get to know people, and so that piece has been more challenging, actually. I think particularly as regards me being able to meet parents. You know, we've been having this week a kind of supercharged program. Now that we're back to more or less back to normal, lots of parents have been coming into sites, and it won't surprise you that more than one of them have said, "Oh, headmaster, it's very nice to see that you actually exist." So not meeting parents last year was a challenge, and I mean, to be honest, I guess the bigger challenges were looking after and caring for all of the Kingswood pupils. I could say much about that. And nice to see the back of the pandemic, but I think the kind of strength of the community really stood up in that pandemic. And
we will of course come on to pupils, to teachings, and to the broader learnings from this time. But I wondered also managerially as an organisation, everyone has been stress tested like never before during this great pause. How has it been for you working with effectively a new team?
Do you know, Greg, one of the thoughts I had this week was when I arrived at Kingswood, I'd been the headmaster of a school before for 8 years. And actually, I'm pretty glad that I'd been ahead before, because I was able to arrive at Kingswood and feel kind of hopefully reasonably confident that I kind of knew what I was doing. And how that kind of confidence manifested, I suppose, is I quickly realized I had a really strong senior management team. And really, I could say to them with super confidence, look, team, just kind of run the school on a day-to-day basis. I'm looking and I'm listening and I'm forming views, but confident that I didn't need to kind of step in because there was anything drastic that needed doing. They were, a top team, and I suppose as a head, you're always thankful if you've got a really strong senior management team to help you kind of steer the ship, as it were. So.
By the way, if anyone would like to ask questions, we can take them either named or anonymously, if you wish. Please use the Q&A button below. Let's come on to that from the teaching staff and the support staff's point of view. I mean, clearly there have been one or two negatives about this time, but what about the positives? What about the challenges that have been overcome? Perhaps some elements of learning from home and so on. Which positives have you taken from this time?
I think one of the things that I realized, I mean, as if you perhaps we didn't need reminding, but it was a kind of the strength of our pastoral system at Kingswood. I think the way our pastoral system is set up is on a kind of house structure, and I think that house system really stood the test of time. So we're in those dark days when our pupils were stuck at home, spending an excessive amount of time in front of a screen. Part of that screen time actually involves kind of daily touch points with their tutor, who was there more than ever then, I suppose, to just check that they were there, they were present, they were making progress, and they were okay. So I think the kind of strength of the pastoral system shone through, and I suppose it just reminded me about how important that is, and that when we now we're back at school and pretty much back as normal. The house structure in all its kind of strength will continue. So I think it was a positive to realize that the structures we'd set up in the past really stood up well during the pandemic. I mean, another thing, Greg, I suppose, is it was part of the school's digital strategy that eventually we have all of our teachers would have common devices, that all of our teachers and our pupils would be competent using Teams and being able to use that technology to help kind of enhance the whole pedagogical process. And we probably had a 3 to 5 year plan to do that. And we ended up having to kind of concertina that really into, in my first term, I set up a digital acceleration group, a committee of people saying, look, if lockdown happens again, we need to be even more prepared than we were last time. And part of that is giving the teachers, for a start, all the kit that they needed. And so in that first term, by Christmas time, when everyone went off, all of the teachers across the prep school and senior school had a new Surface Pro. They were all familiar with using Teams. And I'm very, very glad we did that, because when January happened and teachers had to go home, they were kind of set up with the kit that they needed. And actually now, I was going to say now, Greg, we've actually been able to take all of the PCs out of our classrooms, and the teachers just have a kind of mobile device which they plug in, to whichever classroom they're teaching in, and hey presto, they're on the network. So I think that we've definitely kind of leveraged technology and got better at using it.
There's a very specific challenge for Kingswood and other schools that have boarders, both the absolutely enhanced duty of care for boarders when they were at Kingswood and staying and being there and so on, but also the responsibility for teaching remotely, the quarantine laws and so on. You just talk us through some of the complexities of that, and also what your working assumptions are about this term and the academic year to come.
Yeah, Greg, you can imagine, so we've got 200 boarders at Kingswood, and probably just over half of those will be from countries all over the world. And particularly at the time, the international press around how Britain was doing in the pandemic wasn't always that favorable, actually. And so what we had to do a lot was communicate with anxious boarding parents who were saying, should I send my child back to the UK, half around the world, and how they're going to be safe? And I think that was an important piece to get right. I mean, actually, one of the kind of great examples was we offered quarantine services so that depending on which country you were coming from, you could quarantine at Kingswood before the start of term, and that required a bit of planning and logistics and kind of staff generosity. But what ended up happening is before Christmas, it seems like a long time ago, but there were about 60 boarders that came back to the UK to quarantine with us, and they arrived just after Christmas, but before the start of the spring term. And then the Prime Minister said, right, you're all going home. But because they were here already, we had quite a lively boarding community of students who were with us. And actually, they were the lucky ones in the sense that the rest of the international boarders who hadn't made it back were told to be at home. And then we were delivering kind of hybrid lessons across multiple time zones to boarders who were having to kind of log on at odd times of day or night, depending on where they were. The 60 boarders at Kingswood were having a blast. So that was one of the kind of interesting little vignettes to share. And it was interesting. I think all independent schools were fearful that their boarding numbers would take a beating because of COVID nervousness. And actually, we've started this September with actually a few more boarders than we had a year ago. So,
are you surprised at that, and to what do you attribute it?
I mean, yes and no. I think what it does speak to is the fact that a British independent education is really sought after. It's a kind of, I suppose, it's a kind of key export for our country, and I do think that the independent sector in the UK does a really good job, and I think probably that's still kind of strongly recognised by families abroad.
We've had a couple of questions, one more specifically about social progress, which I'll come on to subsequently, but I want to talk about for you to talk about the civic role of Kingswood in these times, not solely within the Kingswood community, but slightly more broadly. So Anne Twitchett of Round Hill Roastery has asked, was this a time for charitable outreach for those in the community without so much money to provide devices and perhaps some services or teaching for other Bath pupils?
Yeah, Gina, that's in a way, I'm grateful for that question, in fact, because that's kind of exactly what happened. During the lockdown, I had a call from, we have a really great relationship with St. Mark's, the secondary school, just a mile down the road in Larkhall. And I was chatting to their head who said, look, in lockdown, they had a bit of an issue with not having quite enough technology for their teachers or their pupils, actually. And were we in a position to help? And so I put a shout out to some Kingswood parents who really kind of got the bit between their teeth. And I think within a week, the Kingswood parents had donated enough money to buy 20 Chromebooks for St. Mark's, which it was just a great act of kind of community spirit to say, we're lucky at Kingswood in the kind of resources we have. There are others who are less fortunate. Let's get stuck in and help. And so that was a great example of kind of where I think.
And do you think, if not literally that, but that type of thinking will endure, that one way or another, this has been a seismic shock to our personal and our professional systems and so on, and that we have to respond differently going forwards? Or do you think we'll all start just reverting to eventually that which we did before?
No, I mean, I'm really optimistic that it'll be the former. I think one of the things that happened during lockdown is the heads of all of Bath schools, both independent and state, started to have regular Zoom calls. It was first I was meeting regularly with the other independent school heads, whilst the Bath Education Trust schools were meeting, and then we said, well, look, let's come together. And one of the things that we're piloting, in fact, tomorrow, Kingswood are hosting a Mentoring Plus, which, as you know, is a great Bath-based local charity. We started working with them a couple of years ago about training some of our sixth form students to be mentors and then to get out into the community and going to help students in younger primary schools. I think we help at St. Andrew's Primary just down the road. And it struck me, what a great idea. Why couldn't that be a Bath-wide network? Why weren't sixth formers across the city being trained up as mentors and then helping to kind of plug some of the, I suppose some of the deficit that students have suffered. And in fact, we've got Mentoring Plus coming tomorrow to Kingswood with representatives actually from all of the secondary schools to learn about the Mentoring Plus program, and then to kind of try and agree on a vision for how we might roll that out at that mentoring program out across the city. So kind of watch this space, and that'll be a lovely kind of community-minded, citywide school response, which I'm kind of all in favour of, really.
Well, and I'd like to say, as a sort of a marker for our Bath Life team watching this, it'd be a great story to cover to celebrate. The schools are coming together to benefit students and also to partner with charities. The deficit and mentoring, both elements of that, as mentioned. So thanks for that. Please do, for other schools watching as well, please do provide any information about this so that we can help echo chamber it through Bath. So just see, we've got, here's one from Jonathan McColgan. I'll bring this one in straight away. How do you ensure that cliques do not develop between boarding and non-boarding students? I mean, maybe specifically during the pandemic, but slightly more broadly as well. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'll give you another good example, actually. So last night, we had the senior house singing competition, and we had all of the year 9 students, all of the boarders, and then led by our kind of year 13 school leaders, with a boy and a girl house paired, and they effectively had to practice the tune and do a kind of, it was a big old sing-along with choreographed dancing and music, competing against one another. So that was, and I went to watch that yesterday evening. It was kind of riot of sound and colour and dance, and that was a great way actually of making sure that all of the boarders and the kind of day students just had some fun together at the start of term and did some ice breaking. I mean, on a kind of structural level, I suppose we try and get a good balance of where we bring our boarders in from, who are international in particular, so that you get a kind of breadth in terms of countries of origin. And that helps all the boarders to integrate. And look, we also ask that although their mother tongues might not be English, when they're in school and around and about, we expect them to speak English. And obviously, if they're having a kind of quiet dinner in the dining hall just with their friend who might be from China or Russia or wherever, then fine. But I think those are things that we do to try and make sure that everyone integrates.
Yeah, so this time is somewhat euphemistically being called the Great Pause. It's also been an opportunity in Kingswood case to make some physical improvements this summer. Perhaps we'll show some images of those now, as you could talk us through some of the key details of what Kingswood has been doing to its real estate, as it were.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I mean, look, you always, as a head, you arrive at a school and you get, the stuff in your intro. And one of that first picture you saw was of the kind of fabulous new servery that in the main school dining hall. And the servery units were about 17 years old and creaking. And I arrived and said, come on, we take such pride in the food we prepare for our pupils. And they eat there every day. Let's sharpen that up. So we used QCM, which was a local kind of a Bradford-based kitchen supplier that worked with us for years, actually, and they did a really great job kind of designing a new server. You see it there, so it looks kind of modern and fresh. That picture of the garden, I mean, a couple of years before I joined, the government made a decision to open a nursery, which we called the garden, and they had no idea. I think the capacity for the garden was something like 60 youngsters between sort of age 9 months and kind of 4 years old. And quite quickly, those 60 places got snapped up. And it's almost that you had to register your child before you were thinking of falling pregnant. It went mad. And what we did, we had the capacity using a building that we had to grow the capacity of the garden from 60 to 100. And that's been unbelievably kind of transformational. And what we did there was we used Rob Mitchell. Rob's a local architect who's done a lot of work with us, and we used a contractor called Cleveland Construction, again a local company, who did a great job making sure that that project to expand the garden went well. The final picture you saw, there was a beautiful old building called the Posnet Building at Kingswood, which we turned into a staff hub, and that was, I suppose, a nod to the importance of staff well-being. There's a kind of strong community at Kingswood, and I think staff really missed in lockdown that ability, that kind of collegiality that was always a great support to them. And so we've used the Posnet building, and again using local architects and contractors to turn that into a hub for staff to grab a coffee, read the newspaper, pick up their posts, or sit down and do some work or have a chat. So. And again, that was, so what I realized is there was some low-hanging fruit, as they say, in my early days as head. And I thought, there's some good ideas here that we can get across the line. And we had a bit of time last year to plan to do that.
I can imagine there'll be some former pupils watching this, and maybe former parents, as it were, thinking, oh God, that wasn't like that in our day. Everything continues to improve. I'm wondering what's next on your time horizon for other developments. As I've used the term, it's a deeply non-academic term of the real estate. But when you think of the estate completely of Kingswood, what else might be changing in subsequent months? And
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we are so lucky here. We've got about 200 acres of gorgeous real estate in Lansdowne. What's not to like? But it's majestic and troublesome, probably in equal measure. And I think one of the things I've realized as I kind of walk around with my camera, kind of annoying the estates department, probably, is that there are some areas that look great, and there are others, to be honest, that look a bit tired and need some work. So the governors very kindly have released a lot of additional funding, starting this year and beyond, for what I'm kind of terming very unglamorously backlog maintenance. But I do want to get the site up to its kind of pristine best. It is lovely, and we need to care for it. And then, I mean, I've got a very long list of buildings that I'd like to put up or to completely remodel. I mean, funding is always the issue, because in a sense, we're not a rich school. We rely on the school fees that the parents pay, really. So I guess probably there's some things I can't share with you. In fact, I'd love to come back to Bath Life in the not too distant future, because we've got a very exciting project that is going to come to fruition. But the one job that I do want to do is, we've got this wonderful building called the Dixon, where all of our sixth form students for year 12 and 13, they have private study areas, and that building is about 60 years old and probably hasn't been touched since then. There's a great job to do to give our sixth forms a really kind of nicely remodeled, refurbished space that's going to give them the kind of space really that they would expect, and prepare them well for life at university and beyond. So that's definitely on my radar. And I've also got I've got my eye on a really nice kind of sport and well-being centre for Kingswood. Sport at Kingswood is such a big thing, and we've got such high levels of participation, but also we do sport, I think, really well. And to my mind, the kind of indoor sport facilities, particularly at Kingswood, could do with being improved. So I'm hoping to find kind of creative ways to be able to fund an exciting sports hall project as well.
That sounds like a pretty major project. What sort of time horizon on that?
Well, I suppose I'm naturally impatient as a headmaster. So I want all of this, and I want it to go now. Look, I think when you're talking about a sports hall of the kind of the scale we're looking at, we're probably talking about a £6 or £7 million project. So that's going to take us 2 or 3 years to, I think, get across the line. The sixth form centre certainly will be something that we aim to do before that. And Kingswood was founded, in fact, 2023 is our 275th anniversary. So we're using that kind of big birthday, if you like, to see as well if we can put a case for support together, and to try and raise some funds to help us with I think what will be a transformational project. So I'm hoping over the 2023 year, certainly by the end of that there'll be some nice capital development to kind of show for it.
Interesting stuff. I mean, this obviously comes into the overall business model of Kingswood. Like most, in fact, probably all private schools, it is structured as a charity. And we'll come on to some elements of that shortly. But perhaps the other end of that are the bursaries which Kingswood makes available. Is this something which has been, more needed in recent times, that parents haven't been able to afford as much as previously because of their own circumstances commercially? What part do bursaries play in the overall spirit and offering of Kingswood?
Yeah, I mean, a huge part, because going back to the beliefs and ethos of John Wesley, our founder, if we're to be true to that, then we need to take a really kind of generous approach to public benefit, and to make a Kingswood education available to as many people as we can who can't afford it. We did put together some money for a kind of, if you like, an emergency COVID fund. So we wanted to make sure that if there were families who suddenly came across financial hardship that was related to the pandemic, and couldn't afford the fees and just needed a kind of some temporary help, we were able to give that. The other thing which I'm super excited about, actually, on the kind of transformational bursaries front, is we've just been accredited as a school within the Royal Springboard Foundation. Now, the Springboard, they're a charity that seeks out students who they think would really benefit from a sixth form boarding experience, but who come from genuinely kind of deprived backgrounds. And I managed to get a kind of fast track accreditation for Kingswood, and we had a really generous alumni who's offered to fund a boarding place each year, which is just amazing. And so this year, in fact, we've had our first 2 students who've come to Kingswood as boarders from deprived backgrounds, and we're able to give them a kind of free ride, if you like, which is wonderful. And we've had a kind of generous response from alumni to fund that. Actually, what I would love to be able to hope is that each year henceforth, we'll be able to bring 1 or 2 springboard boarders to Kingswood on a transformational bursary. And it's great for them. It's great for our students, actually, as well, that kind of introduce diversity along with the kind of international mindedness of the school already. But I'm kind of very keen to take an inclusive approach.
This may be a deeply naive question, but for those on bursaries, whether it's this new Royal Springboard scheme or other, does everyone know that they're on bursaries? Are they somehow sort of highlighted, are their fellow pupils aware, or is it just simply whatever, invisible?
No, I mean generally not. Actually, generally the only people who know that students are on bursaries are kind of me, the bursar, and the parents of the child concerned. Some students say we're really chuffed to be a bursary student, and we want to say thank you, and we want to use our story to try and bring to life the generosity of others, if you like. So I think it's a case by case. We certainly kind of, because in a sense we don't want attention to be drawn to who's on. I mean, there are so many children in Kingswood on some form of award or other. It's quite frankly not all that important, and we don't want anyone to have a label. So
I wondered. There's a follow-up question from Anne at Roundhill on a point that you've touched on. How does the spirit of Methodism still exist at Kingswood? I think there's that there's a phrase of do all the good you can to all the people you can, all the ways you can, or some such.
Yeah.
The spirit of Methodism, how, if anything, has it been more central in these times? How has it been preserved?
Yeah, I mean, I find it's the kind of beliefs of Wesley, our founder, and the kind of educational characteristics of the first schools he set up, and then I suppose how Kingswood's developed over the ages is a huge source of strength for me. And as we're not that far from being able to share with the public a kind of refreshed strategic plan, and actually we're drawing heavily on, if you like, on the Wesleyan philosophy of first and foremost about a kind of deep care for the individual. I think the education has to start with this wonderful assumption that every child is precious. I think we get that right, then the kind of breadth and balance of what we offer, but also the expectation, therefore, that if everyone's precious, then actually each child at Kingswood's job is to serve and to volunteer and to get out into the community and to use their service, their talents in the service of others. So I suppose that that mentoring plus example I just gave is one example of something we want to do. But I think I'm quite excited about, as we launch a new strategy, about creating a greater number of opportunities for Kingswood pupils to really serve the community in the way that they choose. So I think the Wesleyan spirit is, great, very important to us, and I think it'll always be kind of hardwired. Certainly, as long as I'm head, I've picked up the reins for my stint in this venerable old institution. But community spirit is a really important thing.
And to those parents or perhaps prospective parents watching this either live or subsequently on YouTube, how do you counter the observation that they may not wish an overtly religious education to the extent that the teaching at Kingswood is overtly religious? They have a secular approach, they might like the values, but not the religiosity. How do you respond? Yeah,
I'm sure actually most of the parents who send their children to Kingswood are probably not religious. I mean, I say that kind of confidently. I guess we're living much more in a secular world. Yeah. One of the beauties, I think, of Methodism is its inclusiveness. Look, yes, religious education and theology are important parts of our curriculum, but what we don't see, it's certainly not our job to convince anyone to believe anything. I suppose what we are doing is we are trying to guide our pupils towards a kind of personally developed life philosophy that will kind of help and sustain them through their lives. But I guess it's more about how the kind of Christian message and values manifest in the relationships between people and in the values of love and kindness than it is about whether you're of Christian faith, other faith, or no faith. So I think we get that balance quite right, actually.
But arguably, the true, in fact, not even arguably, the true worth of schools is less the academic results and more the quality of students, their characters, as you've been talking about, perhaps even more so 5 or 10 years after leaving school as fledged adults. But how can you demonstrate that to prospective parents, the value of what you would deem, I'm sure, to be a rounded education, fostering that spirit as you've described?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I suppose the kind of proof of the pudding is doing what you say on the tin, as it were. I mean, it's one thing to have a kind of glossy strategic plan with some inspirational words, but actually, I think one of the reasons why Kingswood's popular, and I think I'm picked up the reins of a good school, is because I think we have a reputation for good pastoral care, and I think we've got a reputation as being what you might call a kind of co-curricular school, where we know from experience that character is developed and students learn as much outside the classroom as they do in it. And so, although 75% of the pupils at Kingswood are day children, because we've got that really significant boarding bolt-on, it gives us the opportunity to have more of a boarding ethos, a kind of a longer school day, more opportunities after school for a really broad range of activities, which are the things where I know character is built. So, I think it's, what we're trying to do is to say, well, look, you can read our prospectus, which tells you what we do, and then actually, when your experience is, well, we're actually doing that. It was interesting, Greg. On one of the things that happened on Saturday was we had a reunion lunch for the students who left Kingswood 20 years ago. So class of 2001. And they just organized it themselves, and they contacted our alumni office and said, it's 20 years since we left, can we come for lunch? And I spent some time with them over lunch on Saturday. And in a sense, one of the answers to your question is to see what Kingswood students go on to do with their lives and kind of go on and become. And certainly my concern is, yes, I want them to get great A-level results at 18, but actually if we get the piece right about developing their characters, then it won't be about where they're at 18, it'll be where they're at 25 or 35, and leading full and meaningful lives, which will be, I suppose, the ultimate test.
Yeah, I guess, as parents, we think we have some element of, the value subsequently in our kids' lives. There's a much larger part which are the kids themselves, but really schools provide so much of ballast, of moral structure, of insight, education, and so on, that it's one heck of responsibility, particularly in current times. Do you feel that burden, or do you just is that just so baked into the offering that you don't need to dwell on it?
Yeah, but as you know, Greg, I left the city. I was an investment banker at JP Morgan and at UBS before that. And I left the city in 2003, perhaps having had a bit of a Damascene moment myself about what am I doing with my life, and how can I be in a place where I can kind of give expression to my values, where I can do a good job by kind of being myself, if you like. And so I made a conscious career switch into education because I feel that my life was transformed as a younger person by having an opportunity to find and develop talents. For me, I kind of I learned how to row. Someone said, "You're a tall guy with big lungs, good seam, and long levers, and you're useless at football. Come to the boat club." But actually, for me, finding and developing a rowing talent completely changed my life in terms of the doors it opened, the opportunities it gave me. And I'm sort of hardwired to say, well, for me, it was sport. For other Kingswood students, it might be chess or music or acting. And I want every child at Kingswood to be nudged to develop their talents, and indeed to find new ones, because I know without question that if you find something you're passionate about and you pursue it, it's good for you and it changes your life. So for me, I'm getting a rambling answer to your question, but I think I find it, yes, it's a burden of responsibility to get all of that right, but it's such a kind of right thing to do that it certainly gets me out of bed every morning.
As a former investment banker, the heart of the business model of Kingswood is actually pretty sweet. There's that Jesuit phrase, give me a child until he's 7 and I'll give you the man. On your model, give me a child at 5, 7, whatever it is, K a term, and I've got enduring value over many years, especially with the follow-on siblings. Do you approach it as a, at least the riders are there, the structure is there as a business, but the iteration is as a charity, as an educational organisation. How is business to you in this context?
I think, well, I'm a kind of qualified chartered accountant by training and then switched into education. And so I suppose I'm in a nice position where I'm able to combine my love of education and kind of pedagogy with my kind of clear passion for commerce and business. And, we are a business. We do have to generate enough surplus to be able to kind of reinvest to make our school better. I think it's a competitive marketplace, and alongside with making a serious commitment to transformational bursaries, quite rightly, parents are in the back of their minds. They're saying, well, there's really good state schools and academies in Bath. So parents are saying, well, why should I spend money on a Kingswood education for my child? We need to have an answer to that question, so I'm kind of mindful that the reality is that at one level we're a business, but perhaps more importantly, we're a kind of community that's responsible for the kind of holistic development of young people. But we just got to balance the books, as it were.
Balance books. I mean, part of it, as both as the quote business, but also, of course, as an educational organisation, are the new students, the new pupils. Let's talk about the marketing in current times and how you've approached reaching prospective parents. I think we've got a video we'll show in the background. When open days haven't been as straightforward as previously, here's an example of one piece. But how have you, as a team, approached it? You can't get people there and been able to.
Yeah, I mean that's one area where the marketing and admissions teams have had to be so creative, because and we've used the power of video much more than we ever did, and so the stock of video on our website. In fact, last week I was with a kind of Bristol-based film company updating the stock of video for things like virtual open days, virtual sixth form open evenings. So we were able to cater for people who can't come to site. Or who might not want to. We've definitely done that. What's great news, Greg, is that tours in person are back. We've obviously got to manage them carefully around site, but we've got an open day coming up later this month, and we reckon we'll be able to put on live tours with led by our Year 12 tour guides for about 80 parents, which is because actually in the end, everyone who, before they send their child to Kingswood, they want to come and kick the tires a bit and actually see what it's like. What does it feel like? Look in the classrooms and see the school at work. So, but I think the short answer is our kind of marketing approach now is a kind of, we're much more of a hybrid opportunity. That there are we've got quite good at staging virtual events, live streamed events, as part of the kind of ordinary way of doing business. And I think actually, to an extent, some of that will stay.
Yeah. Let's come on to pupils and start in one specific area, which is around exams. Exams in 2020 didn't happen. What did you, although you started in Kingswood in September, so immediately after the exams, did you support that approach then? And do you support also the approach in 2021 during your first year?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just look beyond the kind of, I suppose, the sort of government flip-flops and new terms on the best way to do things, in both 2020 and 2021, we did arrive at, if you like, was the kind of best suboptimal solution. And I think what people need to realize is that the way those grades were arrived at in 2021, teacher assessed grades, as they were called, in 2020 centre assessed grades, slightly different approaches. That was an entirely different approach to assessment than getting every student in the country to write a nationally standardized public exam. And so there's a lot of news flow about grade inflation, etc. And to my mind, there hasn't been grade inflation really, because you're not comparing apples with apples. You're comparing an entirely different assessment approach. And I think, to be honest, if it was always going to be, wasn't it, that when, because what we did when we were tasked with assessing grades is you kind of remove the possibility that a student will have a bad day. Every year in public exams, some students cope badly with the pressure. We were able to set up our assessments in a robust way, which minimized the risk that a kid was going to have a bad day. So the results were always going to be better, and they were. And I think, you know, yes, we've got evidence to support every grade we gave, and quite frankly, I suppose I feel, given the how much the students of last year and the year before lost, if they've ended up with one thing, which is a good set of A levels and a place at the university of their choice, then, you know, I'm not going to hold that against them. So.
No, it would be completely churlish when it comes to the pupils, the kids themselves. But the one specific critique is about private schools, not Kingswood individually, but private schools as generality. Private school educated pupils appeared to perform notably better than via the teacher assessments and so on in 21 than state schools. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that is a jolly good question, Greg. Look, I think that as a huge generalization, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, but as a huge generalization, and I think it's got to do as much as anything with resourcing, but I think independent schools, and I think the stats bear it out about, okay, when the country went into lockdown, whether your child was at a state or independent school, on average, made a huge difference as to what the quality of the remote provision was. And so I don't think any child at Kingswood missed a lesson. I mean, they missed a lesson if they were unwell. They didn't miss a lesson because we weren't teaching them. And so we were able to kind of quickly toggle from a kind of in-school model to a remote model. And you know, with parents who kind of had the means to make sure that the child had a bedroom at home where they could learn quietly on a computer that they owned. You know? And so sadly, what's happened is the kind of the levels of inequality that exist in the UK were kind of amplified during lockdown. And so that might go somewhere to answer the question. I think the learning of independent school children suffered less. And that's not a kind of comfortable thing to say as the head of an independent school, because that's not fair. But I think that...
Well, I guess you, your team and others in all such schools, you play the hand you have. And if that is the hand, you know, Kingswood played it as adeptly as it might have been able. But back to the pupils. Did you have a sense that the kids are, you know, essentially, as a cadre, sort of very resilient, very adaptable, or were there almost too many occurrences where kids were under a sort of intolerable pressure and just couldn't cope with working from home, being schooled?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pastoral management system called CPOMs, and all of our staff are trained to log any pastoral concern. However small they might have about a pupil in their care. They log that on CPOM so we can get a picture what's going on at Kingswood across the piece. And definitely we had many more cases of kind of anxiety among students being logged on our pastoral system. So, and I think that was both during lockdown when they were stuck at home, but also when they were at school stuck in their learning zones. It was claustrophobic, I guess, for some of them, where you had all of the year group in a bubble and then in a particular learning zone in the school where they were confined. So it was a bit like, you know, they weren't quite in prison, but they didn't have the freedom to kind of go off to a quiet bit of the campus or go and sit in the library for a bit of peace and quiet. So we definitely saw issues in mental health. And I mean, I guess we tried to deal with those, particularly by making sure that, we, as far as we could, the breadth of our offering remained. So we were risk assessing things to death, basically, to try and work out whether we could get everyone in on Saturday morning, for example, for sport. Even if it wasn't fixtures against other schools, it was just lots of pupils running around enjoying one another's company. And we tried to make sure that we had opportunities each week through the school newsletter for our, I think I told you a year ago, I did an assembly around everyone doing something creative, relaxing, active, or practical during the day. And this became, the sixth formers certainly pulled my leg and saying this is the kind of headmaster's crap challenge. But actually they did, the pupils responded well. They submitted pictures of the things they were doing because we were encouraging them to get out and not to spend their time behind the screen. So I think, and Greg, it wasn't only pupils, actually, the well-being of staff was affected as well. I think it was tough being a teacher last year, particularly because normally, rule 101 of good teaching is you're there to meet your class when they arrive at your classroom. But this time around, it was the teachers who were being sort of itinerant, and the teacher would take their laptop and say, right, I'm teaching year 7 maths in the RE block, and now I'm teaching year 9 maths. I've got to walk to the other side of the campus. And so you're not in control in the way you were, and you're plugging your computer in and you can't start your lessons on time. And so I think the teachers are so chuffed at the moment to say, well, we're back in our department centers. The pupils are coming to us. It feels pretty normal again. And so those indeed, as you say, were some dark days, particularly if you were trying to kind of ply your trade as a teacher.
We've all been in this same storm, perhaps in different boats, and it's been experienced differently. But I want to we're 5 minutes or so to go, so I want to come to 2 slightly bigger picture questions for you. This was actually the first one we received, and I've saved it until now. I thought you'd enjoy this one. It's from Duncan McGibbon. Do you think the tripartite system of the 1944 Education Act better supported social progress? The bigger picture point about social progress and so on.
I don't know the answer to that at all, because you can probably hear from my accent that I didn't grow up here. I was a boy growing up in apartheid South Africa, going to a state school of my own. So I don't know the answer to that question, Duncan, I'm afraid. But in terms of, but if Duncan could come on and provide me with a bit more context, I'll definitely have a go.
That's right. It's very candid of you. I'm sure that's smart advice for anyone. If you're not, I have to say I'm not overtly familiar with the provisions of the 1944 Education Act myself, so I can't even follow up.
I mean, I think what I would say is, and this probably isn't answering Duncan's question, but it might. If it is, I'm happy. It's always going to be, I suppose, that parents want choice in education, and I think it's really important that whether, and I think probably the Australian education system gets this right. The Australians reckon, well, as a parent, you can choose where to send your child. Education is a fundamental human right, so you go with a kind of coupon, if you like, to say, well, I'd like to use the state funding to educate my child at this school or that school or whatever. And I think for too long, in my opinion, there's an ideological divide in the UK. And I think there's a real cast iron commitment from the independent sector to work closely with the state sector to try and offer more places at schools, talking about transformational bursaries. And I think what I can control as Kingswood headmasters, I can work constructively with the heads of all Bath schools to say, how do we work for one another's mutual benefit? Let's put aside ideological differences about what sort of school we are and just try and be good schools, recognizing that parents want choice.
Yeah. And in fact, that's which you've touched on, and Kingswood has been a strong exponent of, that civic responsibility, if anything, has been accelerated via these times. And maybe that it does ultimately connect to the overarching issues about social mobility, which have stalled since the 80s or even since the 70s in the UK. A follow-up question from Jonathan McColgan, again on a bigger picture point. What has been the biggest changes to the educational structures that you have implemented and would like to implement in the coming years?
Now that is a very good question. There's a big debate going on nationally, actually, about specifically about the future of GCSEs. Actually, I think Lord Baker, who was the Education Secretary when O levels became GCSEs, came out about a year ago and said, look, these things aren't fit for purpose anymore. With young people having to be in some form of education until 18, why do we examine them at 16, only to re-examine them again at 18? So there's a big debate around curriculum. We've kind of at Kingswood, we said, okay, well, let's try and be ahead of the curve. And we've launched a Year 9 curriculum this year called Global Goals. And it's a non-exam curriculum that our teachers pulled together over last year. And it's working on the UN. Effectively, the basis is the UN's Global Development Goals. And we've said to the essence of the Year 9 curriculum is to tease out from our Year 9s is, what are the things that they feel passionately about that they want to do to make sure that the kind of world that they're going to inherit is better. And it gives them an opportunity to work towards a non-exam course in teams. So we're getting them, we're building those kind of enterprise and life skills of working in teams, thinking critically, working collaboratively, because I think universities are telling us, look, school leavers aren't ready to thrive at university because they don't know how to cook, they don't know how to budget, they're not sure how to ask for help. Employers are saying, students aren't necessarily, people who join the workforce aren't necessarily skilled up to make a kind of as good a contribution as they can. So I think it falls on us as a school to say, let's start that journey with our pupils, getting those life skills on board as part of what we do. So that Year 9 curriculum, Global Goals, I hope is a success. And what we'll do is when those Year 9s roll up into Year 10, I think we want to further develop that. And part of the Year 9 project, Greg, is also to say, well, let's pilot an approach to student devices. At the moment, some kids bring laptops to school, some don't. There's no kind of requirement or no standardized approach. And we're thinking again, well, we've got to get our student device strategy right. And I think that's something that we'll figure out over the course of this year.
And I'm assuming that Kingswood either has or soon will rekindle its careers talks using local business people and so on to talk about their sectors, as indeed many other schools do.
Yes.
And perhaps, if you want to promote that through Bath Life, we also have contacts with lots of businesses. And I think everyone in the community wants to come together to help this cohort of students in particular. So I'm sure that's welcome for all. You've actually effectively answered a follow-up question from Anne Twitchett. Thinking of our Bath-based businesses, how does Kingswood prepare pupils for the skills we need in an ever-changing digital age? That's a struggle for anyone pedagogically involved, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think if our students achieve kind of basic mastery of the academic subjects that we teach them, so they end up with really good qualifications, knowledge and skill on the one hand, but also if we're teaching them and that if that character education piece, if we get that right by helping them to build self-confidence by finding and developing their talents, then you start to get the ingredients of someone who has what it takes to go and thrive at university and in the workplace. So we had the first headmasters assembly this week, and I had a couple of our senior prefects reading the MASH reports and getting up in front of the whole school and speaking publicly. And I think it's things like that are so important for all of our students as they kind of leave Kingswood and make their way.
Andrew, if we were in a classroom, the bell would be sounding now, but
It would.
but we're not, and it's not. So we've got one last question for you to pull together many of the things you've talked to us about. Give us the pitch, essentially, why people should consider sending their sons or daughters to Kingswood now.
I mean, I think for me, Greg, it goes ultimately down to the cornerstone of knowing and caring for each individual. I think we really do that well, and I think if your child is known and loved at Kingswood, and I think everything else we do in terms of the breadth of education we provide needs to kind of flow from that, whether it's kind of academic or co-curricular. And I also think that in the spirit of Wesley, that doing all the good you can, I think from privilege comes responsibility. And so I hope that the well-rounded children who leave Kingswood are ready to make a difference through using their talents to serve the world. So that's probably kind of an elevator pitch in a nutshell, but built around the cornerstone of pastoral care.
Very good, Andrew. Thank you very much. First of all, thanks to everyone for watching us Bath Live Presents with Kingswood School, and to those who asked so many interesting questions as well. Thank you, of course, to Kingswood's head, Andrew Gordon-Brown, for your candour, wisdom and insights. Andrew, thank you.
Great, pleasure. Thanks.
Very good.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
Please look out for our other education-related webinars in the coming weeks. Look out also, of course, for the Bath Life Awards next Tuesday, and we're delighted to see so many of you there. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been Bath Life Presents with Kingswood School. Bath together, always. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.